The story opens on a quiet, ordinary afternoon, a setting that feels safe and familiar but is about to shift in subtle, emotional ways. The narrator, a young man in his mid-20s, notices her the moment she enters the room. She is in her early 40s, radiating an effortless elegance that draws attention without demanding it. Her presence is calm but magnetic. She moves with grace, a slight sway in her posture, a measured ease in every gesture. There is a quiet strength in her, the kind that comes from experience and self-assurance, yet behind that confidence, there is a softness he senses almost instinctively. He can't help but watch her as she goes about her day, not in a voyeuristic way, but with an instinctive awareness that something about her resonates with him. The first brush of connection is almost accidental. Their hands touch briefly while reaching for the same book on a shelf. It's fleeting, barely a second, but the warmth lingers. His heart beats a little faster, and he notices the gentle pressure of her fingers, the way she retreats her hand just enough to maintain decorum, yet leaves a subtle trace of closeness. The narrator begins to pay attention to the small details, the soft tone of her voice when she speaks, calm and measured but carrying a melodic quality that draws him in, the faint perfume she wears, subtle yet inviting, lingering in the air even after she has moved past, the light in her eyes, a mixture of curiosity and guardedness, that hints at the layers of her life he can't yet see. Every movement she makes seems intentional but effortless, like a melody unfolding naturally, inviting him to listen closely. Their first conversation happens casually, almost by coincidence. She asks a question about something trivial, a shared task, a book, or an event, but her tone carries a warmth that makes him feel at ease. He finds himself leaning slightly closer, drawn by a magnetic pull he doesn't fully understand yet. She notices, too, the way his eyes follow her movements, the subtle tilt of his head when he listens intently. For a moment, time seems to stretch. The world outside becomes background noise. In this part, the story establishes subtle tension and emotional intrigue. It's not about grand gestures or declarations of love, but the quiet electricity of recognition, two people noticing each other, their presence stirring something unspoken. The narrative emphasizes YouTube-safe touches and physical closeness, light hand brushes, leaning slightly toward each other, passing objects in a way that creates warmth without crossing boundaries. By the end of Keynote 1, the narrator is left with a lingering awareness of her, a quiet curiosity, and a subtle longing he doesn't yet name. The audience feels the anticipation and can sense the promise of deeper connection, setting the stage for the slow burn development of trust, intimacy, and emotional resonance that will unfold in the next parts of the story. After the initial spark of connection, the story moves into a phase where curiosity and emotional awareness begin to deepen. The narrator, a young man in his mid-20s, finds himself thinking about her more often than he expects. He recalls the way her voice carried warmth and attentiveness during their brief conversation, and he notices small details. The soft way she tucks her hair behind her ear, the thoughtful pause before she responds, the slight crease at the corner of her eyes when she smiles. These subtle observations are his first signs of noticing her not just physically but emotionally, sensing the layers of her personality she doesn't openly display. Their interactions continue to happen organically. They might share a coffee, walk past each other in a hallway, or collaborate on a small project. Each encounter is ordinary on the surface, yet the underlying tension grows steadily. He begins to notice how she listens, not just hearing his words, but understanding them. When he hesitates mid-sentence, she waits patiently, encouraging him to finish without interrupting, her eyes holding a soft, reassuring gaze. It makes him feel seen in a way he isn't accustomed to, and that feeling sparks a quiet longing to be around her more often. Small touches occur naturally and are carefully written to remain YouTube-safe but emotionally significant. She might adjust his coat as he bends down to tie his shoelace, her fingers brushing his shoulder, or guide him gently around a crowded space, her hand lightly resting on his back. These gestures are casual and graceful, leaving room for the audience to sense the tension without needing overt romance. The narrator feels the warmth of her presence in these fleeting contacts, and each subtle touch lingers in his memory, shaping the growing attraction between them. The story emphasizes sensory richness, The sound of her laughter, low and melodic, lingering longer than expected. The faint scent of her perfume that seems to follow her just slightly, like a quiet reminder of her presence. The warmth of her hand against his skin, momentary yet unforgettable. Each sensory detail reinforces the emotional pull they feel toward each other. There's a rhythm developing in their interactions, a slow, steady cadence that feels natural and unforced. Beyond physicality, the emotional curiosity intensifies. The narrator notices hints of her vulnerability, glimpses that make him want to understand her better. Perhaps she pauses a little longer when she talks about her family, or a flicker of wistfulness crosses her expression when she recalls a memory. These moments of honesty, however small, allow him to see her as a person with depth, not just an attractive older woman. It is in these quiet revelations that their bond starts to form, building trust and an unspoken intimacy that neither is ready to name yet. By the end of this keynote, the audience should feel the tension between familiarity and restraint. The narrator is drawn not only to her physical presence but to her mind, her emotions, and her unique way of experiencing the world. She, in turn, begins to sense his attentiveness and sincerity. Their closeness grows gradually, marked by lingering glances, casual touches, and shared silences, all of which signal the slow-burn romance developing naturally and delicately, setting the stage for the deeper emotional vulnerability that will come in Keynote 3. By the third part of the story, the emotional rhythm between the narrator and the older woman begins to deepen. Their interactions are no longer just marked by subtle touches and shared glances. They now carry a weight of unspoken understanding and emotional resonance. The narrator, a young man in his mid-20s, starts noticing that there is more beneath her composed exterior. She still moves with elegance and calm, but moments of subtle hesitation, slight pauses in conversation, and the way she sometimes bites her lip reveal layers of quiet vulnerability. It's a side of her that is rarely seen, and it sparks in him an instinctive desire to protect, to comfort, and simply to be present. The story introduces the first meaningful, emotionally vulnerable moment in a YouTube-safe, slow-burn manner. Perhaps she is talking about a personal project, a dream, or even a past struggle. Her words are measured, but there is a softness in her voice that hints at unspoken fear or longing. The narrator listens intently, careful not to interrupt, allowing her the space to express herself fully. His eyes follow every nuance of her gestures, the small tremble in her hands, the slight downcast of her gaze, the way her shoulders relax when she begins to trust him enough to share. These details convey intimacy without needing physical romance. Their closeness during this scene is tactile yet safe. She might lean on his shoulder for balance while reaching for something on a high shelf, or lightly brush against his arm as she gestures toward a photo or an object that holds significance. Each touch is fleeting, but it lingers in the narrator's mind, forming a gentle, sensory memory of their connection. He feels the warmth of her presence, the texture of her clothing against his hand, the slight scent of her perfume that seems to wrap around him in the quiet room. In these moments, emotional intimacy becomes the driving force of the story. He offers quiet gestures of reassurance, a nod, a soft smile, or a gentle squeeze of her hand, actions that communicate empathy and understanding without words. The audience sees the deepening bond, recognizing that what is growing between them is not just attraction but trust, respect, and the desire to support one another emotionally. The subtle tension of the age gap is present, but it is reframed here as mutual appreciation for wisdom, experience, and emotional honesty. This part of the story also explores the narrator's internal reflection. He realizes how profoundly he values her openness and feels a protective, almost nurturing instinct, yet he is careful not to overstep. His mind cycles between admiration for her strength and tenderness for her vulnerability, creating a rich emotional landscape. The audience feels this inner conflict through his thoughtful narration, making the romance slow-burning and compelling. By the end of Keynote 3, the bond between the characters has grown beyond surface attraction. They share a subtle understanding, he respects her, she trusts him, and together they create a space where honesty and vulnerability can flourish. The small, safe gestures of touch, the shared silences, and the sensory awareness of one another establish a foundation for deeper emotional intimacy. The story sets the stage for the next keynotes, where unspoken desire and subtle romantic tension will begin to heighten, always grounded in trust and emotional connection. By the fourth part of the story, the subtle foundation of trust and emotional intimacy established in the previous chapters begins to evolve into something more palpable, a slow-burning, unspoken romantic tension. The narrator, a young man in his mid-20s, notices that their interactions carry an added weight. It is not in words, but in pauses, glances, and gestures that speak volumes. The older woman, in her early 40s, radiates a composed confidence, yet he can see the quiet stirrings of curiosity and longing in her eyes whenever their paths cross. They spend more time together, often in ordinary settings, a shared cafe table, a quiet bookstore aisle, or during a walk in the park, but these ordinary spaces feel charged with possibility. Their bodies are close, yet never intentionally provocative. A hand might brush against his as she reaches for her coffee cup. Their shoulders touch briefly when squeezing past other people in a crowded street. Each of these small contacts carries the warmth of proximity, leaving both aware of the magnetic pull between them. The story emphasizes lingering glances and unspoken communication. Their eyes meet in subtle ways, a flicker of recognition, a slow blink, a half-smile that lingers just long enough to let them both feel noticed. These moments create a rhythm of emotional tension, where silence speaks louder than words. The audience senses the growing anticipation, the magnetic curiosity, and the restrained desire, all conveyed without needing explicit dialogue. Sensory richness continues to ground the romance. The narrator notices the gentle sway of her hair as she leans forward to reach for a book, the soft sound of her laughter drifting across the room, and the warmth radiating from her when she passes close by. He feels the subtle energy of shared space, the quiet heartbeat of mutual awareness, a nearly tangible pull that neither addresses directly. These physical sensations become markers of emotional closeness, making the audience feel the intensity of the moment even as the interaction remains safe and YouTube-friendly. This chapter also explores internal reflection. The narrator becomes increasingly aware of how much he values her presence, the way her opinions matter, and the comfort he feels simply sitting near her. He is torn between the thrill of this emerging desire and the restraint dictated by social decorum and age gap awareness. Similarly, the woman exhibits subtle cues of her own hesitation and curiosity, small smiles that last a fraction longer, lingering touches on his hand or arm, moments where she pauses to look at him thoughtfully. These gestures communicate longing without breaching boundaries, keeping the romance nuanced and emotionally compelling. By the end of Keynote 4, the story has reached a point where tension and desire are fully felt but remain unspoken. Their connection has shifted from emotional understanding to subtle, romantic anticipation. The audience should feel the electricity in every glance, the intimacy in every small touch, and the profound awareness that they are both navigating a growing attraction that neither yet fully names. This key moment sets the stage for Keynote 5, where vulnerability deepens and heartfelt confessions emerge, moving the story toward its emotional turning point. In Keynote 5, the story reaches a pivotal moment in the emotional arc. The subtle tension, unspoken glances, and fleeting touches of the previous chapters now begin to crystallize into open vulnerability. The older woman, confident and graceful in her early 40s, takes a step toward honesty, revealing a side of herself she has kept private. It is not about overt passion or romance but about sharing a profound hope and longing, a desire for connection and the possibility of a future. The scene is intimate and quietly charged. Perhaps they are sitting together in a cozy corner of a cafe, or in a sunlit room where the warmth of the day seems to envelope them. She leans slightly closer than usual, her voice soft and tentative, carrying the weight of a personal revelation. "I've always wanted something more, a family of my own someday," she admits, her eyes searching his for understanding. The words hang in the air, delicate yet significant, as he processes the depth of her honesty. The narrator feels a rush of emotions, surprise, admiration, and an instinctive desire to comfort her. This is a turning point because the moment is grounded in emotional connection rather than physicality, keeping the story YouTube safe. He reaches out, lightly taking her hand in his, and she allows it, a quiet acknowledgement of trust and shared intimacy. The warmth of her skin under his fingers and the gentle squeeze she gives in return communicates a wealth of unspoken feelings, appreciation, longing, and a tentative hope. The sensory detail heightens the intimacy without crossing boundaries. He notices the subtle tremor in her voice, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the warmth of the afternoon sun, and the way her fingers curl slightly around his. Their proximity creates an almost magnetic pull, yet they remain mindful of each other's comfort. The narrator's heartbeat quickens, but it is a different kind of excitement, a slow, reflective appreciation for the honesty and vulnerability she has offered. At the same time, the story emphasizes emotional reflection. He realizes how much he values this moment, not just for what she has shared, but for the trust and courage it represents. He senses the gravity of her words and the quiet longing behind them, and he responds with patience, attentiveness, and gentle reassurance. Their hands remain intertwined, their shoulders occasionally brushing, their eyes locked in a shared understanding. Every subtle gesture, slight nods, small smiles, a soft laugh to ease the tension, deepens the intimacy. By the end of Keynote 5, the narrative achieves a quiet emotional climax. The confession of desire, framed in terms of longing, connection, and emotional honesty, propels their relationship forward while maintaining the slow burn nature of the story. The audience senses the vulnerability on both sides, her willingness to share a deeply personal hope, and his careful navigation of his own emotions, balancing admiration, affection, and thoughtfulness. This chapter sets the stage for Keynote 6, where internal conflict and hesitation will add depth and realism to the evolving romance, building anticipation for the eventual resolution. By Keynote 6, the story has moved past subtle attraction and heartfelt confessions into the complex space of internal conflict. The narrator, a young man in his mid-20s, now faces the emotional weight of what has begun to grow between him and the older woman. Her honesty in expressing her desire for connection and a family has stirred something profound in him, something that excites, terrifies, and intrigues him all at once. Yet, the age gap, the societal expectations, and his own uncertainty create a careful tension he must navigate. The narrative lingers on his introspection. He notices how his thoughts drift to her throughout the day, recalling the soft warmth of her hand in his, the gentle way her eyes search for understanding, the calming timbre of her voice when she shares her hopes. Each memory amplifies the growing emotional pull between them. He reflects on how unusual it feels to be so drawn to someone with such life experience, someone who is confident, self-assured, yet possesses a vulnerability he senses only in quiet moments. These reflections allow the audience to see the depth of his emotional engagement, his admiration, his curiosity, and the tender protective instinct he feels toward her. Meanwhile, he also battles hesitation. Part of him worries about societal perception, what friends, family, or even strangers might think about their age difference. Another part questions his own readiness for the kind of emotional commitment she is seeking. These conflicting emotions are conveyed subtly through gestures and sensory details. The way he fiddles with his hands when thinking of her, the quiet sigh as he leans back in his chair, the lingering gaze he casts toward her when she's speaking, longing to reach out but holding back. Every small physical reaction mirrors his inner struggle, reinforcing the story's slow burn tension. She, too, exhibits her own subtle hesitations. While she has voiced her desires openly, she senses his internal conflict and approaches him with gentle patience. Small, safe touches, a hand lightly resting on his arm, leaning slightly closer while discussing an idea, laughing softly at a shared joke, communicate her interest and warmth without forcing a decision. These gestures create a rhythm of push and pull that keeps the emotional tension palpable yet restrained, emphasizing connection and intimacy over overt romance. Sensory-rich descriptions heighten the emotional stakes. The narrator feels the lingering warmth of her hand against his, the faint scent of her perfume still in the air hours after they've parted, and the quiet comfort of her presence in shared silences. These details remind the audience that their connection is multi-layered, emotional, physical in a safe way, and profoundly human. By the end of Keynote 6, the narrator's internal struggle has deepened the story's emotional resonance. He recognizes his feelings and the strong pull toward her, yet he remains hesitant, adding authenticity and realism to the slow burn romance. The audience senses that the story is approaching its climax, not through dramatic gestures, but through quiet, deliberate emotional choices. This moment of tension sets the stage perfectly for Keynote 7, where resolution, clarity, and heartfelt connection will finally emerge, rewarding the audience with the satisfying culmination of their emotional journey. By Keynote 7, the story reaches its emotional crescendo. The subtle tension, unspoken glances, and heartfelt confessions of the earlier chapters converge into a moment of clarity, where both characters confront their feelings and find resolution. The narrator, a young man in his mid-20s, now fully understands the depth of his connection to the older woman. He recognizes not just the warmth of her presence, or the quiet allure of her elegance, but the genuine bond they have formed, a bond grounded in trust, emotional honesty, and shared vulnerability. The scene unfolds in a setting that mirrors the intimacy of their relationship. Perhaps they are sitting together in the soft glow of a late afternoon sun, a gentle breeze brushing through an open window, or in a quiet room where the world outside seems to fade away. The space is simple, yet charged with the weight of unspoken feelings. She sits close, her hand brushing lightly against his as they talk, and he feels the warmth of her skin and the subtle pulse of her presence beside him. Every small gesture, the tilt of her head, the way her fingers curl around his, the soft cadence of her voice, communicates trust and shared understanding. This chapter emphasizes YouTube's safe yet profoundly intimate interactions. Their connection is expressed through lingering eye contact, gentle hand squeezes, subtle smiles, and the comfort of being physically near without overstepping boundaries. Perhaps she rests her head lightly on his shoulder, or he offers a supportive, reassuring hand over hers. The intimacy is emotional first, tactile second, a slow burn romance fully rooted in mutual respect and affection. These small, deliberate gestures communicate the strength of their bond, making the audience feel the culmination of their emotional journey. Emotionally, both characters confront their hesitations and fears. He acknowledges the age difference, the social expectations, and his own uncertainties, but he also recognizes that none of these can diminish the connection they share. She, in turn, shows vulnerability balanced with confidence, revealing that her desire for emotional closeness is not a demand but an invitation. Their conversation is honest and heartfelt, free of pretense or pressure. Each word, pause, and glance reinforces the authenticity of their feelings. The sensory details heighten the moment, the warmth of her hand in his, the subtle scent of her perfume that lingers like a comforting memory, the quiet rhythm of their shared breath in a still room, the soft sound of their laughter mingling with the calm of the afternoon. The narrator reflects on how natural it feels to be with her, how her presence has shifted his perspective on connection, patience, and emotional depth. By the end of Keynote 7, the story reaches a tender, satisfying resolution. They share a moment of mutual acknowledgement, hands intertwined, shoulders touching, and eyes meeting in quiet understanding. Their relationship is secure, built on emotional honesty, trust, and affection. While the age gap and life experiences remain part of their dynamic, they embrace the bond they have nurtured, confident in the path they are choosing together. The slow burn romance concludes with warmth and fulfillment, leaving the audience with a sense of emotional satisfaction and a lingering appreciation for the nuanced, human connection they have witnessed.